Rule 10 covers substitutions and libero replacements. I've broken it into two parts, and this first part covers substitutions, which is sections 10.1 through 10.3. A substitution request must be made before the R1 beckons for serve. A substitute entering the subzone, which is to say coming in front of the extension of the attack line, constitutes a request for substitution. The player doesn't need to say or signal anything. And that's how it usually happens. The player comes up off the bench in front of the attack line, up to the sideline, and R2 blows the whistle to recognize the request and administers the substitution. Alternatively, though, the head coach may verbally or visually request a substitution. A team may make only one request for a substitution during the same dead ball. However, more than one sub may enter as part of one request. And when that occurs, the first sub enters the subzone, R2 administers that substitution, and as soon as they're finished, the second sub steps across into the subzone, and that substitution is administered. If R2 is finished administering the first sub, and then at that point another player starts to get up off the bench and come forward, the R2 would just wave that off as a late request. And more details about the mechanics R2 uses to administer substitutions will be covered elsewhere in training. A substitution request may be made prior to the start of a set, in which case the substitution would be administered after R2 checks the team's lineups on the court. We mentioned in Rule 7 some situations where this might happen as a result of a mistake the coach made in the lineup, but it could be for any reason. Note that if a team needs to change their lineup before the set due to injury or illness of a player, that is not counted toward the team's allowed number of substitutions. If a substitution is requested during a timeout, or a substitution and a timeout are requested at approximately the same time, for instance, a sub comes up to the line, and at about the same time one team requests a timeout, the player is told to go back and R2 will administer that substitution after the timeout has ended. A sub goes into the same position in the serving order as the player they replaced. And if a player who subbed out comes back in later, it must be in that same position in the serving order that they previously occupied. For those who've officiated baseball or softball, it's similar to a batting order. A team is allowed a maximum of 18 subs per set, which is more than in USAV. But as long as that total of 18 is not exceeded, there is no limit on the number of times a particular player may sub in or out, or on the number of players who may sub into a particular position in the serving order. Here are two examples. First, S12 starts the set in position 1 in the serving order. And as the set progresses, S15 subs in for S12, then later S20 subs in for S15, and then S12 subs back in for S20, all in position 1 in the serving order, and that's legal. In the second case, to start the set, S12 is in position 1 in the serving order, and S20 is in position 4. As the set progresses, S15 subs in for S12, and then later S12 attempts to sub in for S20. That is not allowed. S12 can only come back in position 1 in the serving order. She cannot sub in for the player in position 4. An exceptional substitution is permitted to prevent a team from having to play shorthanded when a player cannot continue in the set due to injury or illness, and the team cannot make a legal substitution, either because they've already used their limit of 18, or because all the players on the bench have already played another position in the serving order, and so by the regular rule, they would not be allowed to go into the position of the injured player. Note that if the team has not already used its limit of 18 subs, then the exceptional substitution is counted toward that limit. Rule 10.3.6 details the priority for determining which players might be used as the exceptional substitute. If the reason the team couldn't make a legal substitute is because they've already used 18 and they have a player on the bench who's not played in the set already, that would be the first option. Or if the reason they can't make a legal sub is because all the players on the bench have already played in another position in the serving order, then one of those players who's played in another position could be the exceptional sub. A libero could be used as an exceptional sub for a non-libero teammate, but that is the last option in the priority list. And of course, they would have to change into a regular color team jersey. A team cannot elect to play with fewer than 6 players if an exceptional substitution could be made. And you might ask why a team would even consider doing that. Well, it might be that the exceptional sub would be going into a position they don't usually play, and then they'd be unavailable to sub back in later to their regular position. And a team might be tempted to say, well, we'll just play with 5 for a little while instead of throwing off our rotation. But that's not allowed. Finally, a player replaced by an exceptional substitute may not re-enter that set, but they could play in a subsequent set. And that latter part is different from USAV. An unnecessary delay is assessed if an illegal sub attempts to enter the set, or if a sub request that's been recognized by R2 is withdrawn. That latter situation often occurs when a player is confused and they come up into the subzone, but actually they weren't supposed to sub in until the next rotation. If R2 has blown the whistle to recognize that request and the team doesn't want to make the substitution, an unnecessary delay would be assessed. Often what happens is that the team will decide to go ahead and make the substitution, and that's fine. When the unnecessary delay is assessed in these circumstances, the team cannot make any further substitution until the next completed rally. So in the example in the prior slide, when a player illegally attempted to sub back in to a different position in the serving order, after the substitution is denied and the unnecessary delay assessed, the team can't then send up a different player to sub in during that same dead ball. An illegal substitute discovered on the court after R1 beckons for serve, or after a rally in which the illegal sub participated is completed, is handled in the same way as an improper server, which is to say a point is awarded to the opponent unless they had won that rally anyway, and any points won by the team while the illegal substitute was on the court are canceled unless there was an intervening serve by the opponent.